Welcome back, friends. Today, we're in the countryside, baking a homemade apple pie and making fresh cider from scratch. This is the kind of day that smells like apples, wood, and slow living. If you love this kind of slow countryside cooking, don't forget to subscribe. We're keeping these simple family moments here, so you can always come back for a little warmth and homemade food.
Доброго раночку!
Here in Ukraine, when apples start falling by themselves, people don't ask why or check the weather app. Everyone simply understands the tree has decided. It's nature's quiet signal that waiting is over and that the harvest has already begun, whether you planned for it or not. My grandma used to say that fallen apples are the most honest ones because they weren't chosen by people. They chose their own moment. In Ukrainian homes, that meant these apples were never wasted. They went straight into pies, cider, drying, or jam, turning something simple into something that fed the family for months. Traditionally, apple harvest in Ukraine starts from late August and continues through September. For generations, this time wasn't about convenience or beauty. It was about responsibility, knowing that what you collect now becomes what your family will have later, when gardens are empty and winter is long. Historically, apples symbolized a kind of safety. A cellar with apples meant you had something for children, for guests, for unexpected days, for moments when money was tight and shops couldn't help. Apples were small, but they meant stability. In Ukrainian culture, apples were never just fruit. They became compotes for winter, pies for holidays, dried slices for tea, and a small sweetness in times when stores were empty and sugar was limited. Apples meant comfort, even in hard years. Children were always part of the harvest. After school, you didn't go inside to rest. You grabbed a bucket and went to the garden. It wasn't seen as work in a negative way. It was how you learned that food doesn't magically appear. My husband is starting to build a construction that might look simple on camera, but here it carries real meaning. Digging into the ground, setting a solid tree trunk. This is how countryside tools are born. not from instructions, but from experience, instinct, and years of watching how things were done before.
Тепер тримати тобі. Що? Як?
In Ukrainian villages, men were expected to be able to build, fix, and invent. If something broke or was needed, you didn't wait for help. You became the help. This mindset still lives in their hands.
А тут гарно, я собі буду тут така сидіти. Круто. А що головне, тут Мурочка буде сидіти з рукавичкою постійно. Гарно. Давай, працюй далі.
A tree trunk here is not just a piece of wood. It becomes a pillar of the whole process. Ukrainian men treat materials with deep respect because they know how much work it takes to grow, cut, and prepare something like this. Working with hands here is an emotional language. It's how men show love, responsibility, and protection, quietly, without big speeches, but with tools, dirt on hands, and something useful left behind. While he builds, I'm washing the apples. It looks quiet and simple, but this is where care becomes visible. Washing away dirt, leaves, and dust is also washing away the long road these apples traveled from tree to bucket. Traditionally, this was also the time to decide each apple's destiny. Some for cider, some for pies, some for drying. Even before cutting, Ukrainian kitchens already planned how nothing would be wasted.
Парочка, парочка, Гриці, Варварочка. А це Мирослав і Юлічка.
Clean fruit meant healthier storage and better taste. Long before food safety rules, women here learned through experience that careful washing saved entire harvests. Now I'm layering the apples with sugar, adding cinnamon, and just a touch of salt. This is an old kitchen balance: sweet for comfort, spice for warmth, and salt to make every flavor deeper. In Ukrainian history, spices like cinnamon were rare and precious. Using them meant something special: a holiday, guests, or a moment when you wanted to make ordinary food feel like a celebration. And of course, a real Ukrainian construction is never complete without a cat. The cat doesn't help my husband, but it supervises. It lies down, watches, and somehow becomes part of the team because every household here has its furry boss.
Ще не спала, де ти була?
Meantime, I'm peeling the apples slowly. My advice is simple. Thinner peels mean softer filling and a pie that melts instead of crunches. Small details make big difference. If you love real countryside life, handmade tools, and family cooking like this, subscribe and stay with us. We share not just recipes, but the life and traditions behind them. My husband keeps sawing, shaping the wood for the apple press. There's something hypnotic about watching someone work with their hands. The rhythm, the focus, the quiet pride. In Ukrainian villages, men's work like this is never just about the result. It's a way of showing care and continuity, carrying traditions forward without saying a word. While I continue peeling apples, I ask myself, how do I make this less boring? The trick is to treat it like a small meditation. Focus on the texture, the smell, the color. Each apple has its own shape, its own story, and paying attention makes time pass quickly. Another way is to turn it into a game or memory lane. Remember which apple came from which branch, who picked it, and imagine the pies, cider, or jam it will become. Suddenly, peeling apples isn't a chore. It's part of the harvest story. As I said earlier, my husband is building the apple press. But what is it really? It's not just a tool. It's centuries of knowledge shaped into wood, rope, and careful angles. Each one carried the marks of the family who built it, small cuts, nicks, and repairs that told its story. The apple press is a symbol of harvest, abundance, and community. Families would gather around it, each person with a role. The first sip of fresh juice was shared immediately, sometimes lightly fermented for winter, and it was a moment of joy that connected everyone to the season, the orchard, and each other. Historically, the first simple presses appeared in Europe during the Middle Ages. In Ukraine, villagers adapted the idea to local materials: sturdy timber, thick ropes, and heavy stones. There were no machines, no electricity, just hands, patience, and ingenuity. Anyone with a family orchard could turn their harvest into juice or cider, turning something perishable into sustenance for months.
Так. І тут закладаємо тепер яблучко.
In Ukrainian villages, apple pressing was often tied to festivals and seasonal traditions. The first pressing of the season could be accompanied by songs, small feasts, and sharing juice with neighbors.
Так, рівномірно. Стільки у тебе чи було стільки у мене.
There were small, almost secret tricks handed down orally. Apples had to be layered correctly, pressed gradually, sometimes lightly warmed, to release more juice. Families knew which apple varieties complemented each other. These weren't just technical tips, they were wisdom, observation, and love embodied in action. The press works by crushing apples and gradually applying pressure to extract every drop of juice. The principle is simple, yet it requires skill and patience. Even small missteps, pressing too quickly, overloading, or layering incorrectly, could spoil the batch. Today, apple presses are still used in Ukrainian villages, especially in autumn. Some families organize local festivals, celebrating the first pressing of the season, sharing juice and stories. It's a living tradition that connects the past and present, reminding everyone that harvest is more than fruit. It's community, care, and continuity.
Правда? Смакота.
Well, here we go. Moving on to making the apple pie. You know, apple pie isn't just a dessert. It's a story baked into layers of dough and fruit. Its origins go back to medieval Europe, when pies were filled with apples, honey, and spices, not sugar as we know it today. In England, apple pies were so prestigious that in the 14th century, there were pies made for kings and queens, with elaborate crusts shaped like castles or animals. Royal kitchens experimented with flavors, combining apples with currants, spices, and even saffron. It was art and status in one. Across Europe, each region had its own apple pie tradition. In France, tarte aux pommes was lighter and delicate, glazed with sugar syrup. In Germany, they made Apfelstrudel, layering thin pastry over apples, raisins, and cinnamon. In the American colonies, settlers brought apple pie recipes from Europe. They adapted them to local apples and available sweeteners. Apple pie became a symbol of home, of family, and eventually of the nation itself. As American as apple pie, they say. But back home, in our kitchen, it's different. The pie isn't about status or symbolism. It's about scent filling the house, the warmth from the oven, and the joy of sharing something homemade. Our apples from the garden become the heart of the story, hand-picked and carefully sliced. Historically, pies were a practical invention too. Apples kept for winter could be transformed into a nourishing dessert that lasted for days. Spices weren't just flavor. They preserved. They signaled wealth. They made the simplest ingredients feel festive. Did you know that in royal households, pies were sometimes baked with hidden messages or designs inside the crust? A little heart, a crown, or initials. It was a way to convey celebration or mark special events. Every pie had meaning beyond taste. Apple pie in Ukraine may not have been a royal affair, but it was always a family one. On harvest days, after apples were pressed, peeled, or dried, a pie was baked as a quiet reward for work done, a way to gather everyone around the table with warmth and sweetness. In our own home, I try to honor that tradition. I roll the dough slowly, layer the apples with care, sprinkle sugar and cinnamon just right. Even the smallest details, pressing the edges, brushing the top with a bit of milk, make the pie special, a connection to generations before me. I remember my grandmother making pies while humming old songs, letting us kids sneak tastes of sugar and cinnamon. The smell alone made you feel safe and loved. Baking apple pie in her kitchen wasn't just cooking, it was memory making. Fun fact, in colonial times, apple pie sometimes contained meat. Minced pork or veal with apples and spices was common in England. It shows how recipes evolve. Sweet and savory weren't so strictly separated, and people used what they had. Another interesting tidbit, in 17th century Europe, pies were sometimes used as surprises during celebrations. You could hide a silver coin or a tiny token inside. Whoever found it got good luck or a wish for the year. A simple apple pie could carry hope and joy. And as I brush the top of the pie with a golden egg yolk, watching it glisten under the light, I think about how food connects us. A royal feast in our little kitchen may be worlds apart, but the act of baking, the care, and the joy of sharing remain the same. And here it is, our homemade cider, fresh from the press. The color, the aroma, it's all part of the harvest, coming alive in liquid form. There's something magical about turning apples into something you can sip and share. Now comes the traditional part, transferring the cider into jars. In Ukrainian households, this is done carefully, often with a cloth or funnel to avoid spills, keeping the liquid pure and ready for the long winter ahead. Traditionally, families would store cider in cool cellars or pantries, in glass or ceramic jars, away from sunlight. Some families would even label each jar with the date, type of apple, or family member who picked the fruit. Well, our apple pie is finally ready. The aroma fills the kitchen, sweet and warm, reminding us of every step. Picking, peeling, pressing, and baking. It's a celebration of harvest and family. Now, for the best part, slicing the pie, serving it with a glass of our fresh cider. The combination of warm apples, flaky crust, and crisp, slightly tangy cider is simple, but it feels like a feast in our little home.
Як тобі прислав? Курочкою так гарно пахне. А морочка коло тебе. Вона ж хоче тепла, хоче до пічки.
Thank you so much for watching. These are the moments we love sharing. Real food, real work, and real family traditions. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories from our kitchen and countryside life. Today we harvested so many grapes from our garden that we didn't know what to do with them all. And of course, that meant one thing. We're going to turn every last bunch into something delicious, useful, and a little bit magical.
Доброго раночку!
If you love seeing what we make from our garden harvest and want more real, hands-on cooking and family traditions, hit subscribe and stay with us. There's always more magic coming from our kitchen. We're taking a little break here to sit down and enjoy some of these grapes. We absolutely love them. There's something so simple and joyful about eating straight from the vine and feeling the juice bursting in your mouth.
А мурочка завжди знає.
Вона там заховалася.
All right, let's go harvest the grapes. Did you know that grape growing in Ukraine dates back centuries, especially in the southern regions and the Carpathians? Families would plant small vineyards near their homes, not just for wine, but for fresh eating and winter preserves. Every bunch tells a story of patience and care. Grapes were highly valued historically. Kings and local nobles often received them as gifts. Fun fact, in some regions, grapes were pressed not only for juice and wine, but also for natural dyes or medicinal syrups. Every part of the harvest had a purpose, showing how resourceful households were before modern stores and refrigeration. Now it's time for breakfast. Out here in the countryside, we keep it simple but satisfying. We start with a fresh cup of coffee, the aroma filling the air and waking us up as we prepare for the day ahead. Alongside the coffee, we have our quick and easy breakfast. Sandwiches made with jam, layered with slices of salo and a bit of cheese. It's simple, hearty, and gives us the energy we need to keep going with the harvest. There's something comforting about eating like this. No fuss, just good, honest flavors. What about you? What's your favorite quick breakfast that feels like home? For us, this mix of coffee, bread, salo, and cheese is just perfect. My husband is carefully sorting through the grapes, removing any stems or bruised berries. In Ukraine, this step has always been important. You want only the best fruit for juice, preserves, or wine. It's about respect for the harvest and patience with nature. Meanwhile, I'm clearing the leaves and bits of vine from the kitchen so we'll have a clean space to work. In traditional households, preparation and cleanliness were always part of food respect and family care. Now it's time to wash the grapes. We do it gently because the skin is delicate and we don't want to bruise the fruit. This step ensures that our juice and any other preparations are pure, fresh, and safe, something every generation has valued. Fun fact, in some Ukrainian villages, grapes were washed in cold spring water to preserve their natural taste. People believed that cold water made the grapes sweeter and extended their storage life. Another tradition is to wash grapes in several stages. First, to remove leaves and dirt, then to rinse carefully, and sometimes even soak briefly to make sure no insects or dust remain. It's about patience and care, not just speed. After washing, grapes were drained and sometimes gently dried on a cloth or in baskets. This careful handling preserves flavor and prepares them for pressing, baking, or storing. Small details like these make a big difference in the final product. Now it's time to pack the grapes into jars. We choose the ripest, juiciest berries, filling each jar carefully. Next, we sprinkle sugar over the grapes. Sugar helps preserve the fruit, draws out natural juices, and balances the tartness. After the sugar, we pour boiling water over the jars. The hot water not only extracts the flavors and creates syrup, but also sterilizes the jars slightly, making sure the preserves stay safe and fresh. It's a simple technique that has lasted centuries. Looks like my husband has 2 little helpers today. Our dog and cat are watching the grape, sorting like serious supervisors. They don't lift a paw, but their curious eyes follow every move, and their presence somehow makes the work feel lighter and cozier. Now we place the pot on the stove and carefully put the jars of grapes inside. This method, known as water bath canning, has been used for generations in Ukraine to preserve fruit safely for the winter. Then we pour more water over the jars so they're partially submerged. My husband is now mashing the grapes with a pestle, gently but firmly. This step releases the juice from the berries, creating the base for juice, syrup, or even homemade wine. Using a pestle lets us control the pressure and avoid crushing the seeds, which can make the juice bitter. Now, let's place this pot of grapes on the stove. Slowly heating the fruit helps release even more juice while keeping the grapes intact. Grapes are so versatile, not just for eating fresh, but for all sorts of drinks and preserves. In Ukraine, families have been making grape syrups, juices, and fermented beverages for centuries. Each jar or bottle captures the essence of the harvest, storing summer sunshine for the colder months. Grape syrup was a staple in many households. Boiled slowly with sugar, it could be poured over pancakes, stirred into teas, or mixed into desserts. Even today, a spoonful of homemade syrup evokes the scent of vineyards and the care of generations past. Historically, grapes were also fermented into light wines and ciders in rural households. Not everyone had access to vineyards, but any family with a garden could make small batches. The process was simple, but required patience, letting nature do its work slowly and carefully. In royal courts across Europe, grape drinks were luxurious symbols. Kings and queens enjoyed fresh grape juice, fermented wines, and sweet syrups. Recipes were sometimes guarded secrets, handed down only to the kitchen staff or noble families. Meanwhile, my husband is carefully shelling nuts for our churchula. Each one is handled with attention, the same way families in Georgia and the Caucasus have done for centuries. Fun fact, traditionally, churchula was made during harvest festivals and served to guests as a symbol of abundance and care. The process of peeling, threading, and dipping nuts in grape syrup or fruit juice is a ritual of patience, just like preserving grapes.
Треба зараз їх закручувати. Ти допоможеш? Може, зараз будемо цідити. Допоможеш мені? Добре, а тоді будемо робити чушку.
In France, grape juice and syrup were often used in desserts and even medicinal preparations. In Germany, grapes went into Apfelschorle-style drinks, combining juice with sparkling water. Each culture adapted grapes in ways that reflected local tastes, resources, and climate. Back home, our approach is simpler, but just as meaningful. We make syrup to store in jars, juice to drink immediately, and small fermented batches for special occasions. It's about using every grape and celebrating abundance.
Как Марта злости.
In medieval Europe, grape syrup was sometimes used to sweeten bread and pastries. Before refined sugar became common, it was a prized ingredient, giving flavor, color, and preservation at once. If you enjoy watching how we turn our grapes into juice, syrup, and preserves, make sure to subscribe. There's so much more to discover. Now it's time to pour our fermented grape juice into a bottle. This is the step where patience meets reward. The liquid slowly transfers, carrying all the flavors and aromas we've nurtured from the vineyard to the jar. Winemaking in Ukraine goes back to the medieval period, especially in southern regions where grapes flourish. Families would ferment small batches at home, sometimes using clay or wooden vessels, and recipes were often passed down for generations. My husband is now straining the remaining grape juice through a fine cloth. This step ensures that every drop is clear and free of pulp or seeds. In traditional Ukrainian kitchens, using a cloth or sieve was a careful, hands-on way to get the purest juice possible. While I'm preparing for Churchella, I can't help but think about its history. This sweet treat, made by threading nuts and dipping them in grape must or concentrated fruit juice, has been cherished for centuries across the Caucasus. Families would make it during harvest season to celebrate abundance and preserve fruit for winter. Traditionally, walnuts, hazelnuts, or almonds were used, each adding texture and richness. The process required patience: threading, dipping, and drying. It was a symbol of care, effort, and the sweetness of the harvest season. Churchella was considered a treat fit for nobility as well. In some royal households, it appeared at banquets and was sometimes decorated with gold leaf or served with fine wines. A humble snack for families, a delicacy for kings. Such a versatile confection. In Turkey and Georgia, Churchella has been made for centuries as a staple of autumn. Merchants even transported them along trade routes, appreciating their long shelf life and the energy they provided to travelers and soldiers. In Ukraine, Churchella became popular in regions where grapes were abundant. Families adopted the recipe, adding local nuts and sometimes honey, combining regional flavors with the original method. It became a festive treat for gatherings and celebrations. Even royal families in Europe were intrigued by such preserved delicacies. During the Ottoman period, couriers brought Churchella and other dried fruit sweets to European courts. The combination of sweetness, nutrition, and novelty made it highly prized. Churchella also served as an energy snack for farmers and travelers. Packed with natural sugars, protein from nuts, and the richness of grape juice, it provided quick sustenance during long days in the field. Practical and delicious. Some families would hang Churchella in long strands in cellars or attics to dry slowly, allowing flavors to mature. This wasn't just preservation. It was an art form, making each piece slightly different and unique. Now I'm boiling the eggs. Adding a pinch of salt and a few drops of vinegar keeps the yolks bright and makes peeling easier. While the eggs simmer, I prepare the turkey. I slice it carefully so each piece cooks evenly. In many households, slicing meat properly isn't just about speed. It's about texture, flavor, and how it absorbs seasoning. Frying the turkey requires attention. The pan should be hot enough for a golden crust, but not so hot that it dries the meat. Generations of cooks learned this balance through trial and error, a lesson in patience and observation that we still follow today. The turkey is ready, so I carefully take it off the pan. That golden crust and the aroma of herbs make all the effort worthwhile. It's time to toast the nuts. Heating them lightly in a dry pan enhances their flavor and aroma. This step may seem small, but it turns ordinary nuts into a crunchy, fragrant addition for churchula, salads, or desserts. Now I'll quickly prepare the pie, topping it with grapes. This kind of pie has roots in Ukrainian home cooking, where fresh fruit from the garden was often incorporated into baked treats. Grapes symbolize abundance and celebration, especially in autumn. Historically, fruit pies were a way to preserve seasonal flavors before modern refrigeration. Families would bake apple, cherry, or grape pies, enjoying them fresh and sharing them with neighbors. Each pie told a story of the harvest and the hands that prepared it. In some regions of Ukraine, sweet pies with grapes were also made for festivals and special occasions. It was a sign of hospitality, a gesture of care, and a way to celebrate the fruits of the season. Grape pies were sometimes served during royal visits or weddings. They were decorated carefully, often glazed with a bit of sugar or honey, showing both skill and pride in local produce. So as I arrange the grapes on top, I think about how this simple act ties us to tradition, to past generations, and to the joy of sharing a sweet, edible story of harvest, care, and home. Now, let's get back to the main dish. I'm slicing the turkey into pieces. Taking care to cut evenly ensures that each bite will be tender and flavorful. Next, I spread a thin layer of mustard over the slices. This adds tanginess and keeps the turkey moist. I grate the cheese generously on top. Using fresh local cheese adds depth and aroma, a small detail that makes a big difference in the overall dish. Now it's time to sprinkle the toasted nuts. The crunch and nuttiness contrast beautifully with the soft turkey and melted cheese. I've already peeled the eggs, so now I grate them on top. They add creaminess and a subtle flavor, tying together the layers of the dish. Another thin layer of mustard goes over everything. Finally, I carefully arrange grapes on top. In Ukrainian cooking, adding fresh fruit to savory dishes is a way to celebrate the harvest and bring seasonal flavors to the table. As we finally set the dish on the table, I can't help but smile. Moments like this, sharing food, laughter, and stories, are why cooking matters. It's not just about eating. It's about connection and creating memories. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more recipes, harvest stories, and family kitchen adventures. Try these dishes at home, savor the process, and remember, every meal can be a celebration of flavor, tradition, and love.